Toxic masculinity.
House passes bill to make Washington, D.C. a state.
Yes, this is one of the most disturbing things I've heard all week.
That's not surprising.
No, it's not. I kind of knew this was going to happen now. No need to panic just yet, because I think that the Senate needs 60 votes, 6-0, to pass this kind of legislation in the Senate. Excuse me. And I just had a Coke. Coke Zero.
Like Coke?
Huh?
Coke?
No, yeah, not Parmesan cheese, the real stuff.
Okay.
Coca-Cola. And anyway, it doesn't look like it's going to pass in the Senate. But the fact that they're passing this in the House just indicates how willing they are to pass radical legislation, which I think is, you kind of roll your eyes because you just think it's almost hard to believe that they're doing stuff like this ridiculous. Like, you never thought when you were a kid that they were going to violate the Constitution for politically partisan ideas, like willfully violate the Constitution.
What about intro, darling?
Okay, fine. We'll do the intro. Hold on one second. All right, this is the least professional show on television. I am masculine. No. I'm toxic. She's masculine. We are toxic masculinity.
Toxic masculinity.
Oh man, I wish we were more professional. I wish the show was a little bit more professional. I've been working on, like, I've been taking notes about things I want to change about the show to make us like a really professional looking show, but I haven't had time to implement them yet. I have so many different things I'm working on all the time. But anyway, all right, let's go back to the story. All right, let's go ahead and read this. Democrat-controlled House. Should we do this? I kind of noticed, because I'm a little tired today, I noticed I sound a little bit like the folks on NPR. Should we read this as an NPR story?
Sure.
Valeria doesn't know what that means. I'll do it. All right. Democrat-controlled House votes to transform D.C. into a state, violating the Constitution. Valeria doesn't understand. She doesn't know what the hell I'm doing. Yeah, NPR is like a leftist, publicly funded radio station, and they all of the people on that network, on the radio station, they all talk like that. They all sort of whisper into the microphone. It's really weird. I used to listen to it all the time because it was a good way to get an idea of how the left thinks, but the left has gone completely crazy. That was back in like 2008, 2009 or something like that. Maybe a little bit later than that, but yeah, I used to listen to NPR all the time. All right, Democrat-controlled House votes to transform D.C. into a state violating the Constitution. The House voted to transform Washington, D.C. into a state Thursday on the pure party line vote of 216 to 208. Before the vote, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat of California, as we know, argued in favor of the bill, describing Washington, D.C. residents as being denied their right to fully participate in their democracy. Pelosi also said Washington, D.C. pays more federal taxes per capita than any other state. Its budget is larger than 12 states. Its population is larger than 2 states. Its people have been fighting for voting rights for 220 years. That's not true. With a full 86% voting for statehood. Speaker saluted Del Eleanor Holmes Norton. Oh, sorry. Wait, what does that mean? Oh, delegate. Sorry. The Speaker saluted Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton for her leadership in bringing this historic legislation to the floor. Norton then said of this legislation, Congress has a moral obligation and constitutional authority to pass H.R. 51. They all talk the same. All leftists talk the same. They all talk like this. Republican opposition to D.C. statehood was not so complimentary of Mrs. Norton's socialist utopia. Representative James Cromer, Republican from Kentucky, spoke opposing the legislation. You want to hear what Republicans sound like? I'll do a voice for Republicans. Ready? Let's be clear. Let's be clear. What H.R. 51 is all about, he began. It's about Democrats adding 2 new progressive U.S. senators to push a radical agenda championed by the Squad to reshape America into the socialist utopia they dream about. H.R. 51 is not really about voting representation. It's about Democrats consolidating their power in Washington, Comer stated. Representative Jody Hice, Republican of Georgia, voiced his opposition. His There's a guy named Jody. Why do guys from the South often have female names? It's weird. Voiced his opposition to the idea that Washington, D.C. has no representation, calling it absolutely false. It does have a local representation. It also has a delegate right here in the House of Representatives. It has electoral votes for the presidential election. Seems like something no other city in this country has. H.R. 51 flies in the face of what our founders intended, Heiss boldly stated. Let's see here. The framers never wanted the seat of our government to be a state, and they specifically framed the Constitution to say so, he concluded. One thing that I've often said about this, which, you know, I get the argument that there's a lot of people in Washington, D.C., and they don't have the the same Senate rights as the rest of us. They don't have representation in the Senate. I get that. I get that people might not like that, right? So every single person in D.C. who cannot live without a senator, they do have an option, and that option is move out of Washington, D.C. There's no border around Washington, D.C. keeping them in. They can leave. They're choosing to live in Washington, D.C. for whatever reason. Somebody made a really good suggestion, which is if you live in Washington, D.C., you don't pay certain taxes, right? Certain federal taxes. You're exempt of certain federal taxes. And that would be a good incentive to live in D.C. And it would, in fact, improve Washington, D.C. because a lot of people would move there to save on taxes, and it would become sort of a thriving place. And you might end up pushing out all the poor people because, you know, all these rich people want to save money might move in. And all the rent might increase and everything might become more expensive and more of an elite place, but it would certainly, you know, provide an answer to this issue that they keep bringing up of it's not fair. They don't have a senator. It's like, okay, they don't have a senator representing them. Like big deal. They can move. But yeah, I mean, there's other solutions other than just make them a state, considering that it's constitutionally inappropriate, and we'll go ahead and look into that here in the second part of this article. Jim Jordan took the totality of the Democrats' radical agenda to task, so he just went off on them. He says, Democrats started last week with one of their members saying we should get rid of the police altogether. They ended last week with another one of their members being admonished by the trial judge in Minneapolis for saying ridiculous things, he pointed out. And what did Democrats do in between, he asked? Okay, sorry. I emphasized the did. That was inappropriate. Let me try that again. And what did Democrats do in between, he asked? They passed this bill out of committee, which gives 2 new Democrat senators to the District of Columbia, and less than 24 hours after that bill passed in committee, they introduced legislation to pack the Supreme Court. I think, first he says out of committee, then he says in committee. I don't quite know what that means. Because I'm not a representative, or I'm not a senator, I don't know how all this stuff works exactly. I should probably figure that out if I'm going to try to talk intelligently about it. All right, let's see here. In 3 months, the Democrats have been in control of the federal government. They've created a crisis on the southern border. They continue to push to defund the police now so that they can continue their radical policies, he reminded the House floor. Think about what else they passed out of this body, Jordan said. Representative Andy Biggs, Republican Arizona, argued that no state has been admitted to by the Constitution, but no state was created from a territory which was crafted in the Constitution. The legislation will now proceed to the Senate, where Senator Mark Kelly, Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, and Angus King have all said that they are a doubtful no vote. I think that means they are a no vote. They presume that they would vote no on it. The Biden administration, however, declared its support of D.C. statehood Tuesday, contrasting previous Democrat administrations' legal determinations of unconstitutionality. The White House Office of Management and Budget issued a statement of administration policy on H.R. 51, writing, establishing the state of Washington, Douglas Commonwealth, that's D.C., Douglas Commonwealth, as the 51st state will make our union stronger and more just. Of course it will. But legal scholars and 2 Democrat administrations have objected to D.C. statehood's viability without a constitutional amendment to the 23rd Amendment. The Office of Legal Counsel in 2007 believed it was unconstitutional The Justice Department under President Ronald Reagan and also Jimmy Carter stated the transformation was unconstitutional, and so did the Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia when he sat on the D.C. District Court of Appeals, Breitbart News reported. And that's from Breitbart. Anyway, so yeah, if you don't want to live without a senator, don't live in Washington, D.C. And maybe we should deal with their concerns about that. But certainly making it a state is an inappropriate thing to do, considering that it's unconstitutional. But, you know, these Democrats don't care about such minor, trivial things. They'll just do whatever they want because they want more. I mean, what this comes down to is the Democrats think if they make it a state, they're going to have more power in Washington, D.C. They're going to have it's going to be less likely that any Republican president will ever get elected again, right? All the stuff they're doing right now is to try to make sure that Republicans never get elected again, and they keep electing Democrats. I know that you're not an American. You know, you didn't grow up here. So the question of what do you have to say about this story, I think I know the answer to, but let me ask it anyway. Valeria, what do you think about this story?
Nothing.
Oh, shocking. All right. In that case, let's move on to the next story. Darling, could you read the next story, please?
Well, if I can.
I think it's Micaiah Bryant.
Micaiah Bryant's neighbor insists police had to shoot.
Right. Okay, so let's have a look at this.
They didn't have to.
No, they didn't have to. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. Right, so Micaiah Bryant's neighbor says officer had no option but to shoot. A neighbor of the Ohio teenager fatally shot by police reportedly said that video from his security camera made him believe the officer had no other option.
Toxic Masculinity. Weekdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific.